Now on to the various types of suicide that Durkheim's research unveiled. He said that there was egoistic suicide, that is where the individual, where a society, come on, stress the bonds between wider society. In other words, in a society where there is stress on individuality before anything else, such as Protestant societies, which stress the responsibility of the individual to make their own decisions and accept consequences. In this way, failure becomes an acceptable reason for suicide. I think we're kind of familiar with this idea, but what Durkheim is saying, that this is more likely to happen in countries where individuality are emphasized, in particular England. He also described altruistic suicide, where the individual sees himself as less important than the group. And so individual failures are less responsible for suicide. He also points out, however, that this isn't an ideal scenario in every circumstance, because where there is too greater emphasis on the collective, it allows for self-sacrifice for the collective. So a suicide bomber, for instance, would be an example of this, so identified with the norms, values, etc., or ideology put forward, they are willing to die for it, and in that case, it leads to suicide in a different way. Anomic suicide, and this is perhaps his most important categorization, suggests that where, because culture, norms, values, and roles, etc., provide a clear set of rules, a guidance for life, where this guidance starts breaking down, such as periods of rapid economic or social change, this weakens it. Durkheim in particular was worried about revolution, and he had seen through the aftermath of the revolution that these ties were breaking down, that the way norms, values, roles, and status worked was not having the hold on the society. So what this happens is a less integrated individual into the society. So Mowgli hasn't got the rules. He's in and he's alienated because he doesn't understand his place or what's going on. And this in turn leads to suicide. Fatalistic suicide, Durkheim says, happens in highly oppressive societies. This is the idea that there is no escape. So, for instance, during slavery, a lot of those captured for the Atlantic crossing, took their own lives rather than deal with the bleak situation. They found that it was better to die than so they felt forced, if you like, into that. Likewise, their high suicide rates in prisons could be explained in the same way. The key problem, or one of the key problems with his research looking at internal criticisms as opposed to the interpretive criticisms, is the operationalization of concepts. Now, operationalization is making a concept become a countable thing. Typically, some concepts are harder to operationalize than others. For instance, it's very hard to measure happiness or something like that. Here, the concept is social integration. And the whole thrust of his research looks at this concept, because a lack of integration leads to anomie, which is his most important aspect. and that anomie leads to suicide, and this is what he was very scared of. But he does not provide an unambiguous definition of it, nor a method for measuring it. So this key thing is kind of assumed rather than worked through. So it points to a lack of validity, if you like, for it. Further to this, it can be seen as failed science, that the study he put together, because the purpose of the scientific method is to prove or disprove. And the fact that the key claim here is that Durkheim says social integration is linked to religion and family membership. However, there's no way of testing what social integration is. There is no sense of verification of his explanation. So in that way, he fails his own test. He fails to meet his own standards, as it were, because there is no support for the claim given. He relied on official statistics and coroner's support reports in particular. But the facts and figures here are questionable. For instance, in Catholic countries, suicide is regarded with it's a great shame to commit suicide in Catholic countries. To such an extent, and given the nature of the coroner, maybe someone who knows the family, maybe someone integrated into that local community, not wanting to expose an individual as someone who committed suicide. So what it suggests is there may be less likelihood of categorizing an event as suicide, a death as suicide in Catholic countries because of the stigma it leads to. And so in that way, these figures are false.